Is the coronavirus evil? If we think of it under the heading of creation, the answer is no. The coronavirus is not evil. The negative answer is unavoidable if we understand properly what creation is. We believe that everything in the universe is created, which is to say that God is the creator of everything that exists. He gives existence to everything, making it be just what it is for however long it continues in existence. Creation is thus a very specific claim. It's not about why something came to be in one way rather than another. Creation does not answer the question why water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. The answer to that question can be explained in terms of other things in the universe. Similarly, the creation of why the novel coronavirus SARS-CoV-2 appeared on the scene as the year 2019 was coming to a close is not a question answered by God, invoking God as the creator. If you want to know, for another example, how some dried powders, an egg, and some milk and water turned into a birthday cake, you would be asking a question whose answer is given in terms of stuff that's already in the world. With the right proportions of baking powder, sugar, fine flour, and so forth, placed in an environment of the right temperature and left undisturbed for the correct amount of time, a delicious cake emerges from the oven. We can explain questions about birthday cakes and viruses and the boiling of water in terms of other things that are in the world. But what we cannot answer in terms of other things is why we have birthday cakes at all. Not why something is a birthday cake instead of being a sausage or a doorstop, but why it is anything at all. Why there is anything at all. The wonderful 20th century theologian Herbert McCabe said, this is the question of the whole shebang. The creation question this is, the question whose answer is because there is a creator. The epigrammic philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein put it this way, the mystery is not how the world is, but that the world is. An important thing to say at this point is God did not have to create. God never has to do anything. I suppose he's an ideal of a 6-year-old child or something in that sense. There are no obligations that we can place upon God. We say this not because we understand it, but because the opposite has to be false. It makes no sense to say God could be under some constraint that would make him do something. If there is something that makes God act, that something would be the real God, and what we were thinking of as God would be its creature. So we say creation is gratuitous. Another marvelous 20th century theologian, Robert Farrar Capon, said the whole universe is like an orange peeling hung on God's chandelier. It doesn't have to be there, but inexplicably to us, God seems rather to like it, and so it stays. Which is to say, there is no reason for you and me to continue in existence for another second. No reason for the whole shebang to go on from moment to moment. No reason for that orange peel to keep on hanging there. God's creation is not so much a beginning of the universe as it is a holding of the universe in being. Yes, God created you. He seems to have done so at that wonderful moment when a lucky sperm cell won the race to the egg. But God also creates you every second. Take a breath. He just did it again. That the whole shebang keeps on going is a sign that God likes it. In a sense, to believe the world is a creation is to set ourselves the task of learning to find the world likable. Try this on for size. If it exists, it's beautiful. This seems to be true of things like sunsets, but what about things like squeaky music or diapers? Imagine you are living in a house with a child who is learning to play a violin. The sound is painful, like fingernails on a chalkboard. Remember, children, we used to have chalkboards. But it's also necessary, part of the birth pangs of a string musician. Listen carefully, and you just might hear some amazingly lovely tones of growth. Or the example that's more tangible, changing a diaper. It's smelly, it's a situation where disease might be transmitted, one needs to do it right. But it's also a way of showing love, of caring for another person. So there are moral consequences to believing in God as creator. We start trying to like the world, and that can lead us to change how we treat the world. So, try this on for size. If it's real, it's good. This one doesn't seem right, does it? Hurricanes hit the coast and cause death, illness, wreckage, moldy conditions, homelessness, and more. They are very real and they don't seem good. What good is a hurricane? But that understandable question nonetheless seems to have an answer. Hurricanes are a feature of the earth having the atmosphere that it has. I'm no meteorologist, not the son of a meteorologist. But I'd guess that to get rid of hurricanes, we'd have to stop the Earth's rotation. And if it didn't rotate, it wouldn't be the fertile planet that it is. Hurricanes are one of the things you get when you get the Earth. Thinking about hurricanes can move us from an initial sense of their badness to a place of humility about our ability to judge badness. Although they don't seem good to us when and where they happen, indeed their human consequences can be horrific, hurricanes are nonetheless a feature of a good, rotating, life-supporting Earth. We call them bad because they can hurt us, but in the big picture they have their place. So try this on for size. Even dangerous reality is good. Goodness, it seems, is not human-centric. When God likes that orange peel, it's not because it guarantees a life free of danger for human beings. He likes thunderstorms as much as calm, sunny beaches. They are all real and beautiful and good. I know a priest who wrote, "God damn COVID." He meant it literally as a request for God to damn the disease. I approve of the strong feeling, born from the enormity of the harm the virus has done to humanity. And it's not just to humanity in the abstract, it's our friends and neighbors who have died from it. It's personal. I also approve of the urgent request that God bring evil things to damnation, which I would take to be to non-existence. Send the virus to hell is pretty much the same as send the virus to non-existence, although I cannot make any sense of the notion of asking a virus to be punished. Some scientists have tried to make mosquitoes infertile as a way of fighting malaria. Apart from the matter of unintended consequences, it's a long way from mosquito contraception to mosquito damnation. But despite all this, is it true that the virus itself is a bad thing? Bad for us? Undeniably. Bad for the planet as a whole? Possibly. But bad in itself? I confess I find it a visually beautiful particle, an individual of this virus, this severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2, when enlarged to a size that we are able to see it. A poet might even call it regal, playing on that word corona. Also awesome is its canny capacity to co-opt a host cell and cause it to multiply copies of the virus, an undertaking of awesomely intricate complexity. Molecular biologists who study it learn about an incredible yet tiny thing. Indeed, that we can know about it anything at all induces amazement. If it weren't killing us, we'd gladly acknowledge all this beauty. All viruses are awesome and mysterious, yet so tiny. I am told that if we queued up 100,000 virus particles in a straight line, it would still be shorter than an inch. Well, for big fat viruses, maybe 2 inches. But for little skinny ones, just 1/10 of an inch. Yet, what are they? Metaphysically, they are strange, exceedingly strange. Viruses exist on the borderline between living things and inanimate matter, neither themselves alive nor exactly dead either. They have DNA or RNA. SARS-CoV-2 has RNA, yet they cannot reproduce on their own, as, for instance, a cell can by dividing. I looked at some scientific articles along the way, and I never found them calling an individual virus a cell, or any other word that a layperson might expect. They use some neutral word like particle, because viruses don't fit in. Viruses are like evening and morning, neither light nor dark, neither day nor night, yet they are there. They exhibit a strange in-betweenness that's caught early in Genesis. God divided the light from the darkness, and the evening and the morning were the first day. Here is a hint that no matter how straightforward creation seems, there is still more there. Creation is not self-explanatory, and amazing borderline things like virus particles are yet another way that it points us to the mystery that is beyond creation. Strange wonder like this attaches also to many molecules, to other viruses, to bacteria, and so forth. Creation is staggeringly awesome, as Pascal grasped, not only in the infinite vastness of the heavens, but also in the infinitesimal vastness within the microscopic world. If we never had to think about its effect upon us, if we could just consider it in itself, I think we would unhesitatingly say that SARS-CoV-2 is real and beautiful and good. Nonetheless, of course, multiple millions of people have already died from it. Every one of you will know or know of some of them. And the fatalities around the world continue to grow. Can something with awful consequences really be good? In my book, Losing Susan, I have a section called The Second Best Book of the Bible. And a little bit later in the book, I have a section called The Best Book of the Bible. And I hate to spoil this for you, but I'm going to. I consider the best book of the Bible to be the book of Job. When Job is grievously tormented by disease and the loss of his children and his possessions, he refuses to take a simple answer. In fact, from the beginning of his troubles to the end of his book, there is no answer in words that satisfies him. Yet in the end, he is satisfied. What satisfies him is not an answer, but a walk with God on creation's wild side. God wants Job to see how the universe contains awesome and beautiful things that exist independently of human beings and in fact have no care for humans, don't know about humans, and are beyond the capacity of humans to control. We will consider one of the beasts that Job sees when he walks on the wild side, that Leviathan, the final creature that God asks Job about. This is Job chapter 41. Leviathan lives in the sea. No one could catch him with a fishing line. No one could force a hook into his nose. He would not plead with Job for mercy. He would not make a covenant with Job. He will never sport about with Job. Job cannot cook him and serve him up in a banquet for his friends. Job cannot even put a barbed wire into his skin. In fact, if Job were to touch him, Leviathan would kill Job instantly, and Job would remember no more. This is not the last thing that God says to Job, but we can see the point. Leviathan is covered with a hide of scales, such that nothing can harm him, and he can destroy any other creature that might come in his way, and he would do the destruction without even thinking about it. Let it sink in. God has made a creature that can have no interactions, no fellowship with human beings. Nonetheless, this creature in its own way is real and good and beautiful, awesome in his power, his strength, his movements, his firm and hard heart, his impenetrable skin. And here the penny drops. Job's affliction was in his skin. Job sees that he and Leviathan are completely different. From a walk on the wild side, Job learns, God brings him to appreciate that the universe contains things he can never live alongside. And simultaneously with this insight, Job becomes grateful that God has made a place within the universe where a vulnerable man can live with other vulnerable men and women. The place God has made for Job is not a safe place, but it is a human place, a place of kin and neighbors and friends. When we believe in God as creator, we begin an adventure that asks us not only to try to see creation as beautiful, but challenges us not to see ourselves as the center of all things. The creation that God likes, that nothing forced him to create, that he could stop holding in being anytime he wanted, but he has promised through Noah that he will not. This creation is not safe. So to believe in God, this adventure of believing in God, is not to start on a journey that takes us into safety. In fact, it takes us out of safety. To walk with God is sometimes to walk on the wild side, the place where the Leviathan dwells, a place where viruses lurk. I can't see why anyone who reads the Bible would think the point of having faith is to have a safe life. Safety. Tell that to Jonah, swallowed within the belly of the fish, or later scorching in the heat of the desert sun. Tell that to Job, impoverished and covered with sores. Tell that to the disciples as their teacher expires on the crossbeam. Creation is vast and awesome and fascinating, but it is not safe. God makes a world that has lots of things in it and huge expanses of space with which and in which no human being could live. Of course, we still want to ask, why did God allow this virus, SARS-CoV-2, to appear? It seems hard to give the answer. It's hard to give the answer because we are, once again, I say, aware of the vast harm the virus has brought to human life all over the world. And to spell out a few of those harms: deaths, hospitalizations, isolation and fear of catching it, depression that follows upon human isolation, shutdown of communal activities, uncounted economic loss to be paid by the next generation, yea, even by the children who have been deprived of communal instruction and formation, in some places continuing now. The toll of the virus, yet immeasurable, is certain to be immense. How can such a thing be good? How can God allow such a thing? Still, we do have the tools to answer it. It is good because it exists. Just as Leviathan is good, and for that matter, buzzards are good. The virus performs its activity with amazing cleverness on a microscopic level, and so on. The second big heading of my talk is the word sin. And under this heading, I will just very briefly speak about the question, is the presence of the coronavirus an evil thing? If you will agree with me so far that the virus itself is not evil, we could still ask, is its presence an evil thing? There are beings in the world that do evil things. They aren't things like viruses or leviathans. They are rational beings, human beings. Rational beings are capable of sin, and we do sin. The virus itself is not evil, but there are countless ways in which people have sinned, and their actions are tied up in this in complex ways. So we don't have the time to dive into this. It would be a whole other lecture, but I wanted to just identify it because it's important to at least say this. Here are some possible ways that sin may be involved in the presence of the virus, right? If there were a deliberate human cause in the development of the virus, or a culpable carelessness in a laboratory, we are talking not only about creation, but about creation and sin. If the virus developed as a consequence of human harm to the environment, that also would be a matter of sin. If authorities, in response to the virus, hid information or misled people or overstated the clarity of what they knew, then those were also occasions of sin. The definition of sin is this: sin is the choosing of a lesser good in the place of a greater good. Every sin that you can think of is that. Because whatever is chosen is going to be something that's real in the world. And being real we will say it's good. But it should not be chosen at that particular time, that is, in a time of sin. It should not have been chosen. Something else should have been chosen instead. And it's that move which only rational beings are capable of, like you and I. People like us, like you and me, we are capable of doing this. We are capable of sin. So sin is surely part of the coronavirus picture, as it is a part of most human pictures. So I hope I've completely muddied the waters, and look forward to our conversation. Thanks.
All right, so we have time for questions. Victor, because we're live streaming, if you could repeat back before you answer any questions from the audience. Sure. And if anyone's feeling shy and you have a question, I can come and grab it. So, opening it up to questions.
So I want to, first off, thank you very much. And I
Glad
want
to be
to
here.
preface this question with, I am a big fan of the Job picture of creation.
Uh-huh.
So I prefer that one. And yet I see also in the biblical literature this somewhat dueling tendency in which there's this almost utopian picture of creation before it fell. And we have these ideals of a vegetarian Eden and
Yes.
lions and lambs not fighting each other and stuff like that. So how do we reckon these seemingly contradicting pictures of creation?
It's a great question. I'll try to repeat it, and you can correct me if I. But it's a lovely question. Thank you very much. It's the Job picture gives us a view of creation, but there is also in the biblical material a view of creation which is that it was idyllic and beautiful before the fall, and that things like lions eating lambs are a result of the fall. And everyone was vegetarian in chapter 1 of Genesis. Or perhaps vegan. I mean, there's no cheese in Genesis chapter 1. I can tell.
You don't know that.
It may be an unspoken presence. Yeah. So I think, in general, the Bible is a subtle book. Can we raise it up? It keeps falling. I must be knocking. The Bible is a very subtle book, and it's that way, I think, because human reality is very complex. So somehow both those things are true. I mean, Genesis 1 is structured to say that the human being is the point of creation. The sixth day ends with human beings being created, and they are the summit of creation, and they have charge over everything else. And that charge does not extend to violence or eating or anything like that, but it is called dominion, which is a very strong word. So we have that picture, but immediately we have another picture in Genesis 2 of the human being as a very humble thing. The man is created early on in Genesis chapter 2, and his job is to dig the soil. There aren't any plants yet because there was no one to till the soil. So he's humble. He's down there with the hummus. He's down there with the earth, right? So it's like, if you want to talk about human beings, you're going to be talking about something that's both high and low at the same time. Something that's both the kind of the point of God's creation and yet not the center of creation. And there's no easy way to put all that together. And I think that's why the Bible is a mess. Because we, not because we're a mess because of sin, but that we're just God created us in this very interesting, complex way that goes beyond grasp.
So you get the idea that he's creating, like God is creating right now, and then right now, right now.
Yes.
And I guess for me, the sort of the inverse, or the argument that I have had to make is why not? Why is it that winding it up and just letting it go once is the same thing?
Good question. So the question is, I assert that by creation we mean God giving existence to things, and that means holding them in existence. And it's a distinct notion from beginning. And why couldn't we just say that God set everything in place, wound it up, and then let it go, and understand that as creation? Aquinas held that there was that by creation we mean God giving existence, and Aquinas explicitly says it's a distinguishable notion from beginning. He thought philosophically there is no contradiction implicit in the notion of infinite past time, so that God could still create a universe which had the characteristic that there was always a yesterday. That there does not, he didn't think that was, he said his view would be that if a notion is self-contradictory, then God can't do it. God can't make a square, something that's a square and a circle at the same time. But if there's nothing contradictory, and he didn't think there was in infinite past time, then the creation could have been that way. And whether there's infinite past time or not, then would be answered in one of two ways. Aquinas answered it by saying that he interpreted the very beginning of Genesis to say that there was a beginning. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Hebrews, so on the basis of biblical revelation, he held that the universe had a beginning in time. But still, he didn't think that was the same thing as creating. I suppose we today could, we are in the position of being unable to answer it scientifically. And I think in principle it's unanswerable scientifically. The universe is 13.7 billion years old, I'm told, on authority. But that just means the Big Bang was 13.7 billion years ago. If there had been a previous universe that collapsed into a singularity of the Big Bang, all memory of that would have been wiped out in the Big Bang. So there could be, infinite past universes. No problem, I think, for theology, whichever of these it was, because God is the reason it exists. God's not. God. The get-go. I may have given too long of an answer that avoided your question. But, thank you. Great question. If the virus is good because it exists, is it a sin to fight against it? Well, no. There are many times we fight against things because that's what we have to do. So one country goes to war with another, and it may be necessary for that war to happen. But the actual soldiers who are facing one another, they don't have any particular grudge or reason to kill the other. They can recognize each other's humanity and still participate. I mean, unless you went down the pacifist line, but still participate in the business. I find, by the way, the business of sterilizing mosquitoes a really interesting question for fighting against malaria. I'm kind of scared of it because of the unintended consequences of making that kind of intervention. But I don't mind messing up with mosquitoes' reproductive capabilities. You know, it's like, it doesn't, just as I don't mind selecting plants for my garden that are more productive than other plants. Or, I mean, there are all sorts of ways we interact with the environment all the time, and for good or for ill. And when it's, but it's not for ill because we shouldn't have been interacting per se. It's for ill because we interacted in a way that was not good to go. I don't know if that, so, I mean, otherwise we would just quit hospital work, everything, right? Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah, please, Rachel.
So, here, I'll just come up. So, it's a great question. And I was thinking that to fight against something, we have to be fighting against something that is a foe. But this virus is not, it can't fight back, it just is being. And it reminded me, the sun is a beautiful, good thing, but if I go out in August without sunscreen, I'm in trouble. But I don't think I'm fighting against the sun and the beauty and the good of it for sustaining all life by also putting in confines that allow me to live without blisters and skin cancer. And there's something about, we fight against flesh and blood and spiritual principalities, but not inanimate objects that just are, that we choose how we relate to them, that it's on us, not them.
Thank you, Rachel. That makes me realize, and maybe I would want to change my vocabulary here. It is a sort of metaphorical use of the word fight to speak of fighting cancer or something like that. Yeah, the war on drugs, or, I mean, we have this kind of language that's common, but maybe we should think about it. Yeah.
Versus fighting, me fighting you is very different than me
Yeah.
fighting cancer.
Yeah. Trying to restrain a criminal from doing an evil act.
I mean, even on that note, the language of a virus hijacking a cell and forcing it is a metaphor. Right? The virus has no. That's language that we use. What people do to each other, right? So the virus is not. It's not out to get us. It's just doing what it does.
It's just doing what it does. But it does. The question is about the language of hijacking. When we say a virus hijacks a cell to do stuff, but it does. It does hijack. I mean, in a certain way, that metaphor makes sense to me, because it's taking over a cell and tricking the cell into multiplying it instead of the cell multiplying itself.
I suppose it depends on if hijack has malice intent behind it or not.
Of course, it has no malice. It has no malice. Yeah.
I think the creation's fallenness and creation isn't good, but the falls happen, creation's distortion, evil being part of the created order somehow. I don't know how that fits with this.
Yeah. The question is about the fallenness of creation, and I suppose implicitly the question is why use the word good for a fallen creation? Yeah. I think in the world to come, John Polkinghorne, as you may know, is a scientist, theologian, died not too long ago. He's a wonderful, humble, and brilliant guy. He talked about, it was speculation as a physicist, but talked about the world to come as being here it is. Our current universe, the world that we have, has evolved through the interplay of chance and necessity. It's through that interplay, for instance, that complex carbon-based life forms like you and I, like you and me, have I done that twice tonight? Were possible, that we became possible, right? 5 billion years ago in the universe's history, we would not have been possible. So it takes, it takes this interplay of chance and necessity for there to be the possibility of people like us in the universe. It's the same interplay of chance and necessity playing upon random variations that brings cancer about. Because cancer is a sort of random variation, an unfortunate random variation in a cell that then starts reproducing in the wrong way and uncontrollably. So it's that is the characteristic of our world. Whether we want to call that fallen or not might be going back to kind of the first question: are we talking Genesis 1 or Genesis 2? But it's in our world. Well, Polkinghorne said that the world to come will not be characterized by that, but will be characterized by living on the Spirit of God, whatever that means. So that our life now is a life that's sort of run by nature as we have it. Our bodies and our life in the world to come will live on God's Spirit. Anyway, it's obviously a knowable mystery of what the characteristics of that life will be, but that's sort of
Taking the mosquito
yes.
and malaria,
Yeah.
which in turn sickle cell provides protection against malaria.
Yes. Yes. So complicated. Yeah. The observation is the mosquito and malaria, but also sickle cell condition provides protection against malaria. So things that can be bad also can be good. For things that are harmful to us can also be helpful to us. There was another hand going up. Yeah.
So I understand and appreciate the idea of sin necessitating intent, and whether it's good or bad, or whether it's sin. And what I was wondering is, does evil have to require intent? And because if you consider what good is of the Garden of Heaven, sort of what Paul's idea and creation idea is that God's presence and sustaining rule is
Yeah.
present in both. And then we have this in-between period where God has actually moved away from creation. He separates himself. In the garden, he's no longer walking face to face. We need a mediator through the Holy Spirit. And so does evil require intent? And is things like hurricanes and viruses therefore not actually evil because they are the destruction or the decay of God's creation?
Yes. So the question is about intent, the relationship of intent to evil. Does evil require some sort of intentionality? I think I think hurricanes are a feature of the world being a good world. That is, the world being what it is. There's a simple argument: it's better to live in Waco than Houston, right? Something. No, not really. Hurricanes are because we have tornadoes. But weather events that are harmful to it, like even just like the sunshine that Rachel was talking about, things that are obviously good and necessary for us can also have harmful effects upon us. That's not really where we would say evil is, because we would say all those things are good. But if we were doing things that increased the harmful, let's say, if we could do things which would mitigate the harm of these foreseeable events that are harmful to human beings, and we chose not to do those things, that is where there could be sin, because we would be avoiding doing a good in order to do some other, say, lesser good. I thought about this sometimes with regard to tsunamis. A wealthy country has the ability, and I think many do, of having warning systems, so that if a tsunami is coming, there is time to reach protection. If we avoided offering such warning systems for a sin, that's where sin might enter into it, a decision not to offer such a thing. And that's where the intent would be. So the intent is, to intend an act is to aim at doing something. And sin is to aim at doing a lesser good when one should have aimed at a higher good. Do you want to say more about that? Yeah.
So we follow up with another question. Could life-destroying tsunamis have happened before the fall?
Pardon me?
Could life-destroying tsunamis have happened before the fall?
Could life-destroying tsunamis have happened before the fall?
So my question is not about the intent, about simple intent. It's about whether the domain in the presence of destructive capacity requires intent.
Mm-hmm.
And if that destructive capacity in the destruction of God's good created order is demonstrated most highly by pre-fall and heaven, and then the destruction of God's good creation, so the capacity of viruses to destroy life, is evil in itself and does not require intent.
It is, it seems to me that the Bible subtly, in chapter 1 of Genesis, points to defects in creation that are unavoidable. And that what chapter 3 gives us with the fall is the introduction of the sort of thing that I was just talking about, of choosing a lesser good instead of a greater good. So that's sort of sin. So the clues are small, but on the third day of creation, God says, let the earth grass. And the earth is not able to grass. The text goes on to say, and the earth put forth grass. This is in some rabbinic scholars, and there's apparently some, I only have the sketchiest knowledge of this, but some Jewish writers who've said that the earth was the first to fall, because on the third day it did not do what God set forth for it to do. Now that's pretty much of a stretch, and I have to take that on faith. But in the sixth day, it's a bit clearer, where it says, let the earth put forth living animals and creeping things, ... And God created the living animals and the created things. So the text says, let the earth do it. God's calling for the earth to do it, but the earth is not able to do it, and God has to actually not create. The word is make there, but God has to make those things. So there's some possible evidence in chapter 1 that even ab initio, in the most beautiful, harmonious picture we have, that there's still some struggle between what God would say and what comes about.
But he declares it as good.
And he does declare it as good. The question is what that means. It is good because it exists. Is it good because it's the best possible? God's not unhappy. Clearly, he's not saying, oh, earth sinned in the way we sinned. You know, God is unhappy with our sins. But there's something there that's less, I don't know. It's still good, though. It's still very good. Yeah. John?
Just working from some kind of traditional categories, philosophically, natural evil.
Yes.
You're not saying coronavirus is moral evil.
No.
It doesn't have agency, freedom, volition.
Right.
You're not saying it's natural evil either, right?
Yeah.
Because that's your whole point. So when you start off the doctrine of creation, for me, I thought you were moving in traditional Augustinian directions as far as the evil presupposes some standard of goodness. So you're not going to say it's philosophy, it's not a pervasive good. You're not going to say I'm going to give positive existence to evil because we can't make that move gnostically. But you're going to say that it's positively good.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify, just make sure I'm
So the question is, with regard to a distinction of, forgive me, those two kinds of evil. Natural and moral. Yeah, philosophers, right.
you like it or not.
I'm saying the coronavirus is obviously not a moral evil because there's, again, no agency. And I'm saying that it's, so what counts as a natural evil?
That's what my thought was going to be. Can you give me an example of natural evil?
I think a natural evil is always, it would strike me, it would be a necessary within a picture. And that you would say, and it would be a sort of complementary or distinguishable claim. So if a lion eats a lamb, it's bad for the lamb, but it's good for the lion. The lion is just being a good lion in doing that. It's hard on the lamb to be in the same environment, right? So if the virus hurts me, it's still just being a good virus. It's bad for me, and I think that's what natural evil is. But maybe I don't know the philosophical literature as you do.
We have time for two more. These will be our last.
So, basically, in terms of natural evil, it's all in the eye of the beholder. I mean, it's in the eye of the beholder, right? Because a tsunami is disastrous for humans, but not for the lobster at the bottom of the ocean.
Oh.
It doesn't bother the lobster, right?
Yeah.
So, evil is what is evil to the recipient, which is what you're saying about the.
Yeah, evil, so the question is a bit more about natural evil.
Yes.
And that the evil depends somehow on one's perspective, I think I would say. If the tsunami is destroying your village and killing 1,000 people or whatever, obviously that's bad for those people. But the tsunami exists in the first place because the earth has this core, and if the earth didn't have that core, it wouldn't be the wonderful, fruitful, living place it is. So we don't have to say the lion is bad because it eats, and we don't have to say the tsunami is bad because it kills people. Yeah. It was.
So, jumping off of that, that kind of implies that you couldn't make a nice, happy earth without hurricanes and tsunamis and predators and viruses and all those sorts of things. So, if there's some sort of forcing habitable places to have tsunamis and predators and viruses, that's a constraint on God, isn't it?
Well, is God constrained when we recognize that 2 + 3 = 5? Or is God the reason 2 + 3 = 5? So if he's holding the universe in existence, then this is what it is. But there is another question, which is, why didn't God make a better universe than he did? Right? And unfortunately, the only answer that human beings are able to come up with for that question is, we don't have any place to stand to ask that question. Because the question is, in a sense, to ask, why isn't God doing a better job of being God than he is doing? And that implies that we know what God's job is, and that we could say it. And thus, we would be sort of turning ourselves into creator. But I was at a debate once when Peter Singer said just that. He says, if I were God, I wouldn't have all this disease.
Great. All right. Well, let's
And you can find his email online and send him all kind of emails and thoughts. I'm sure he would welcome them. But thank you for coming out. We'll see you next week with Dr. Elise Edwards, and we're going to come very much into the realm of human evil next week. So thank you.